Recording in progress.
Testing. Best we can do, unfortunately. So we will be beginning the meeting shortly. Members of the public joining on Zoom will not be able to hear us, but obviously you can hear us here in the room. We'll have a handheld recording of the swearing-in, so that will be part of the public record. But we'll try to keep working for a solution for those that are virtual, but really the only solution we have is invite them here for now. So I appreciate everybody's patience. We'll be getting started very shortly.
We'll start with Mayor-elect Kevin McDonnell.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for your patience and for being here tonight. A big welcome to everybody. And what we do before calling a meeting to order is to seat the new council, which means the swearing-in process for us. And I'd like to have our clerk, Kendall, take it from here.
Thank you. If you'll join me in the front of the dais here, and I'll invite your family to join you as well.
Thank you.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Kevin McDonnell,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Ooh, thank you.
And now I'll invite Councilmember-elect Cader Thompson and your family if they're joining. after me. I state your name.
I, Janice Cater Thompson,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United
the
States,
Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now I will invite Councilmember-elect Shribs, and if you have anybody joining you, please invite them up. This to hold in your left hand. All right. Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, John Shribs,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservations
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And lastly, I will invite up Councilmember-elect Now and your family or friends who are joining you.
I didn't either. Is there? It's not yours.
Yeah, you can hold this in your left hand. And you already have your right hand raised. And repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Karen Now,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of the Petaluma,
the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic.
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States,
to the Constitution of the United States,
the Charter of the City of Petaluma,
the Charter of Petaluma,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
and that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties which I'm about to enter. Congratulations. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, welcome, new council, and before I call the council to order, let's invite in our Spanish translation. I'm inviting in Maria Galvez and Monica Aparicio to provide information to those who want to listen in Spanish.
Buenas tardes, me llamo Mónica y estoy aquí con mi compañera de interpretación María. Estamos aquí hoy como intérpretes. Este evento se llevará a cabo en español e inglés y se utilizarán ambos idiomas simultáneamente. Después de la explicación, se activará la función de interpretación. Si usted está conectado por computadora, verá un icono de mundo en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Si está conectado con su tableta o teléfono, pulse el más y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del mundo o interpretación de idiomas y ahí elija su canal de idioma. Gracias. Thank you.
And thank you. And now may we have the roll call of our new council?
Yes, and I just wanted to make a note for those who didn't hear, we are live on the live stream with audio now. Councilmember Barnacle.
Here.
Councilmember Cater Thompson.
Here.
Councilmember Healy.
Here.
Councilmember Now.
Here.
Councilmember Posake.
Here.
Councilmember Shribs.
Here.
Mayor McDonald.
Here.
All members are present.
Thank you very much. And let's start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we observe a moment of silence. Okay, and we are moving on to tonight's agenda, and I'm asking if anyone on the council has any alterations on tonight's agenda. And before I ask the council that, I'm actually going to call on our city attorney here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to start off the new year by trying to speak a little more slowly on my remarks to work with our translating colleagues. So tonight, we're recommending that the council add an agenda item to the meeting pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2B of, and the reason for that is there's a need to take immediate action to ratify the Emergency Service Director's emergency proclamation to be dated effective January 3rd, 2023, because of the 7-day deadline for City Council ratification of emergency proclamations of the Emergency Services Director, and because the need for action came to the city's attention subsequent to the posting of the January 9, 2023 City Council meeting agenda, which was on January 4th, 2023, and that's due to local flooding that has occurred since that posting. The agenda item description of the item we're recommending be added is as follows. Council ratification of emergency proclamation by the Emergency Services Director dated effective January 3, 2023, regarding the New Year's 2023 flooding event. And that's the end of the agenda description that we are recommending. And I will add that if the council is to add this item to tonight's agenda, it will require a 2/3 vote of the city council, and that's at least 5 affirmative votes. Thank you, and if the council has questions, I'll be happy to address them. Oh, I should add too, the city manager will be making some remarks in her report tonight about the current flood conditions and the city's response to those. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call on Councilman Healy to comment.
Well, I was just going to go ahead and make the motion to add this to the agenda.
I'll second that.
So that's motion by Healy and second by Cater Thompson. Any other comment? May we have the roll call vote?
Barnacle,
Yes.
Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
Now,
Here. Yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Moving on to our general public comment for the evening. Let's see,
Mayor, if
we-
I can interrupt really quickly, can we just confirm that's added to the consent calendar?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That's what I was going to suggest.
Thank you.
Mayor and council, if that's okay.
And are we good with the motion as is? So we're
Yes.
in the
Yes, I just
consent
wanted to
calendar
clarify.
and good to go.
So then let the record reflect that that item has been added in accordance with the Brown Act, and it's been added to the consent calendar for tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarity. Let's see, so general public comment. During public comment, the public is invited to make comment on items of public interest that are within the city council's subject matter jurisdiction and are not listed in the current agenda. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and depending on the number of persons wishing to address the council, time will be allocated in equal shares totaling no more than 20 minutes. Members of the public were previously invited to provide written comment by emailing to the city clerk 1 hour prior to the meeting, and any comments received prior to the meeting were distributed to the council and placed on the agenda on the city's website as part of the public record for the meeting. Comments received after the cutoff time will be distributed and posted following the meeting. So let's see here. Have we received any public comments?
Yes, we received one public comment prior to the meeting that is posted online with the agenda packet.
Fabulous. And do we have anyone in our Zoom audience raising their hands and taking care of that part of things?
Thank you, Mayor McDonald. I will start a 30-second timer. And ask any member of the public that wishes to speak on items that are not on the agenda, please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you're participating by phone. Speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and that this meeting is being translated. So please pause between sentences for translation. A countdown will appear for the convenience of the speakers and the viewers. And we have one member of the public wishing to speak to general public comment. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and I have one speaker card here from someone in the audience who wants to speak on let's see, on the consent calendar, so that's not this moment. There we go. So let's have our member from the Zoom audience be put into comment now.
Thank you. I will reshare my screen and set the timer for 3 minutes. And invite our telephone speaker whose last 3 digits are 045 to unmute themselves and begin their comments. I believe you may need to push *6 to unmute.
*9, correct?
I believe *9 raises their hand. I think *6 is the one that unmutes.
Okay.
Oh, they've lowered their hand.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
Patrick. Hi, everyone. Ben Peters. Great reception. I will say for those of you who might be watching in on the YouTube feed, because the Zoom link didn't work, that the phone is functional. So just a note for those who were unable to attend via Zoom that the phone line does work. My comment is about the topic of consent calendars. A couple observations. I will say in the pre-COVID era, typically a speaker card was filled out for an item on the consent calendar. That item was then removed from the consent calendar, and then the public had the opportunity to speak as it were an agendized item, i.e. 3 minutes. In sort of more recent history, that hasn't quite been the case. Either speakers or people raising their hand to comment on the consent calendar have been given the opportunity to speak for 3 minutes on the entire consent calendar versus individual items. Also, there's the purview of even removing the items from the consent calendar. And all this is to say that looking back at the city policy and procedures, I believe it's item G on page 9, it does talk about both public comment items and also the consent calendar items. And if you read that, it says that the purpose of the consent calendar is for non-controversial items. And in sort of recent votes, we've had consent calendar items which have been non-unanimous. And so I would just ask, what is the definition of non-controversial? And perhaps there be a future agenda item to actually revisit the city's policies and procedures, at least the ones posted are way back from 2004. And so that's my point is, there have been several consent calendar items which may or may not be non-controversial, and I do think the public should be granted 3 minutes per item. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and that was the last hand that was raised before the 30-second timer expired.
Thank you. And that closes our general comment for the evening. Now we'll move to council comment. And I'd like to start on my right and head across the room this way. So Councilman Barnacle, would you like to lead off tonight?
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
And Councilman Healy?
Thank you. I haven't had any liaison meetings to report on, but I will give you, and I look forward to the city manager's comments on the local flooding aspects of the recent storms. I'll give you a little short version of the water supply impacts of the major storms. I had reported previously in December that Lake Sonoma had been down to 96,000 acre-feet of storage, which was the lowest it had been since it was constructed. And then we had a first atmospheric river storm that hit Petaluma pretty hard, but managed to miss the Lake Sonoma watershed and brought Lake Sonoma up to 98,000 acre-feet. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, Lake Sonoma is at 172,000 acre-feet. It is an enormous improvement in the water supply situation for the region. That actually puts us several thousand acre-feet ahead of where we were this time last year. And if people will recall, after early January of last year, it stopped raining. So basically, worst case scenario right now, we're going to be no worse off this coming summer than we were last summer. And that's without the storms coming in now. We're still quite a bit below average, and we're nowhere near capacity in Lake Sonoma, although the water supply pool in Lake Mendocino is now completely full. So it's a pretty dramatic change in the circumstances. So welcome to the new normal in California. Thank you.
Well, okay. Welcome, Councilwoman Cater Thompson.
Thank you. That's good to hear. about the water. I just want to tell people I'm very grateful for being here. And it was great to have my family with me. My daughter from Davis and her family were unable to come because of the weather, but they were here in my heart. And I just want to say that my mother, who is not with us anymore, was always my champion. And I really miss that she is not here tonight. So I miss her. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Now.
Well, congratulations to you, Mr. Mayor, and to Councilmember Taylor Thompson and to Councilmember Shribs. It's really exciting to be here. I wanted to first start out thanking the voters of District 3, my neighbors and my family and my friends, and especially my parents that were here, Ray and Etta Marie Peterson. My 3 adult children and their spouses couldn't be here. They're all back to school, and school is pretty important. And both my daughter-in-laws are teachers, and my daughter is a teacher. So the 6 grandkids are all back in school. And I'm only here because in 1975 and 1976, the then Helen Putnam, who was our mayor, our very first female mayor, was very inspirational to me as a teenager. She was my mentor. She opened her office to me here at City Hall as a high school student. And I would not be here probably if it wasn't for her to inspire me to take on Petaluma as a community and get involved and stay involved. So those teenagers out there, someday, they're going to be our future mayors and council members up here. And I want to thank all of Petaluma, and I look forward to listening to everybody. I believe our contacts for the new council members are online, so you can find my new email address. It's know@citypetaluma.org. And when I finish learning all the iPad ins and outs, I'll respond, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pozike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did not have anything overriding occur at my meetings. I've had a couple in the last 3 weeks since our last meeting, but I did have an interesting meeting with our SAFE team, who asked me to come and talk with them about end-of-life issues, as they're getting, it was news to me actually, and I was interested to hear that the SAFE team is getting lots of questions related to the end of life. So we had a good discussion about that for almost an hour, and that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Shribs.
Thank you for bringing me to this dais here, especially District 2 is what I've been voted in and representing. So it's a pleasure to be part of this group now and helping out, and it looks like going to be a great team to work with over this next several years. I need to also thank my wife Patty and my son Albert were with me up here during the induction ceremony, and so I have to really thank them because they were not too sure about me doing this. So I was really glad that they joined in and really helped and campaigned and really walked the district with me, which is really great. And just to give you a little character, a lot of folks don't know because I'm from District 2, not citywide, so a lot of folks may not know who I am or why I'm here. But I was with the General Plan Advisory Committee for the last several years with several other committees. And that sort of like got me inspired to join this group to carry on those ideas that are being generated there. And some of the characteristics that I have, because I was a scientist and a teacher as 2 of my major careers. My third one was being part of 6 or 7 different committees over the last 6 years of retirement. Some of the things that I do that you may notice is I ask lots of questions, and I'm very creative and out-of-the-box thinker, so sometimes I'll be thinking things in different perspectives. So that's just some of my characteristics. So I'll be here to ask lots of questions today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess in terms of my comments tonight, I do want to congratulate all our new members and Gator Thompson, Shribs, and now. And I look forward to your contributions to this council. I want to thank all who ran in this election. I wanted to thank all those who engage and participate in the government for the people of Petaluma. I appreciate that. And I want to thank all the people of Petaluma for this opportunity and to thank those who helped on my campaign, especially my wife and campaign manager, Melissa Hathaway, but there's so many who helped. Additionally, I want to thank all the city workers who are out and about tonight and every night, making sure we're safe and dry in these times of big storms. I'd like to thank staff for the fine celebration we had earlier this evening. And just note, the council may be the most formal body, but the cities and also has committees and commissions, which are now taking names for work on those efforts, and that's a great place to start a path into helping your city to a better place. I did have a meeting of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee on January 5th. I got to say farewell to one of my favorite committees, make one last pitch for the importance of that 500 feet of smart path that connects downtown to the east side. But in addition to that, they also reviewed a policy called Neighborhood Traffic Calming Programs, and it seems like everyone's number one issue is speeding and safety on streets. So I'm looking forward to great things from that committee again next year. Thank you, and we'll move to the city manager's comments.
I was just going to pause briefly before Peggy makes her comments and ask PCA to come up. There's an update on the audio I think they wanted to share with the council and viewers.
Hello, my name is Greg Lentz. I work with Petaluma Community Access. We record city meetings for the city of Petaluma. Jack, who is one of our access assistants, did some troubleshooting. We do seem to be getting audio to the broadcast platform, so the audio is being recorded on Telview. The audio on YouTube also seemed to be fine. The audio on Zoom was sketchy at best, but he was able to call in to the phone number and listen to the meeting that way. The meeting will be available, both video and audio, to watch on the website, or you can download it at the conclusion of the meeting. And that's the end of my comment.
Thank you. And that's in the name of making sure that our meetings are accessible, so I appreciate everybody's patience. Wanted to give our community and our council an update. These successive storms in this atmospheric river event have strained the region's systems, as we well know, but we're very thankful here in Petaluma to report that while we've had some flooding, we've weathered the storm fairly well in Petaluma thus far. Fire, PD, Public Works teams have been working around the clock, responding to emergency calls, monitoring stream level gauges, and ensuring the city's stormwater infrastructure is functioning properly. And we want to thank our dedicated team members for their service and for being at the ready. Looking forward, we do have more unstable, potentially severe weather systems with accompanying thunderstorms this evening through this morning, through tomorrow morning, and the forecast overnight and into Wednesday, with a brief respite, and we're really trying to encourage our community members, these breaks in the storms, to make sure that you're prepared, that you get your sandbags, that you're clearing your storm drains, and just making sure that your property is safe, because we are expecting more rain into the weekend. Given the emergency response is January 3rd, and with the expected future response needed, we will be proclaiming a local emergency today for the council to consider ratifying during tonight's council meeting. This action requires a ratification within 7 days, and given what we're facing with these protracted events, we want the city to be in the best position to request resources and reimbursements as needed. To note, President Biden has declared California storm-related emergency a FEMA event. Governor Newsom and Sonoma County have both proclaimed emergencies in their respective jurisdictions as well. A Petaluma-specific proclamation would allow the city to seek FEMA reimbursement for storm-related costs back to January 3rd and through the upcoming storms. Some additional status updates, and we really encourage folks to sign up for Nixle. If you're not signed up for Nixle Alert, to go to nixle.com and put in your information so you get both texts and emails. Current status on road closures, they've reduced because the water has receded. Rainsville Road between Stony Point and Liberty Road is still closed. Stony Point between Petaluma Boulevard North and Pepper Road is still closed, and a portion of Auto Center Drive. Our stream level levels appear to have crested and are receding. Staff continues to monitor the situation, and we will overnight as well and as needed for future storms this week. Sandbags are still available. Please only take what you need because we need to make it last throughout this week. And they are located at 3 locations: the far north end of Hopper Street, Prince Park, the parking lot near the entrance from Washington, and Leghorn Park. A temporary evacuation center has been opened at the community center, so if there is a need, and especially overnight, we want to make sure that folks are taken care of. We also see that the Denman Reach floodway projects appear to have had a mitigating effect on the stormwaters as water entered the floodway project, and flooding the area around the project has not been as severe as expected or as in previous years. While water levels are currently receding, we have a few more storms expected this week now that we are proactively monitoring flooding potential in locations that have historically flooded, but also some relatively new and/or sensitive areas that our community has alerted us to and that crews and staff have observed. We've got staff driving out there, making sure that as soon as they see ponding, that we address it right away. We're thankful for a break in the weather until tonight's storm and hopefully a break Thursday and Friday. So again, please be prepared before the next significant storm is forecasted to arrive. We do want to encourage that folks report blocked storm drains, culverts, or other flooding to the Public Works and Utilities Hotline at 707-778-4546. Again, 707-778-4546. And to report dangerous road conditions, fallen power lines, call our police department at 707-762-2727. Again, 707-762-2727. And that's one more thing to report, non-storm related. As the mayor mentioned, a recruitment is now open to fill vacancies on our General Plan Advisory Committee, our Measure U Oversight Committee, our Transit Advisory Committee, and our Youth Commission. Applications are due by 5 p.m. on January 16th, and appointments will be made by council at a regular meeting following the close of that recruitment period. More information can be found on our website at cityofpetaluma.org/joining CCBs. Just go to our website, cityofpetaluma.org, and look up CCBs, and you will find that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. And now let's move to our consent calendar. And let's see, any comment from any council before we proceed with this? Councilman Schripp?
Okay, I've got, being a newbie here on the council and trying to learn all the procedures and things, I did read the staff reports in each of these agenda items up here, and I do have several questions, and I was wondering, should I ask one by one and get answers, or should I just go through the whole list of questions and then get answers? Which would you prefer?
Well,
my suggestion would be that that you give us the whole list, because that way we can hear them all at once and decide whether we want to recommend some be taken off and for staff comments or whatever. If that please the council.
let's start there. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, starting with agenda item number 3. So we have Janice Cater Thompson to be the vice mayor, and then I'm mentioned in there as the backup, just in case. But does that also mean that I would be the vice mayor the second year? Is how I'm reading that? Would that be true?
Typically, yes.
Yeah. And then down in resolution on 4, looking at the calendar, we're moving a couple things back because of holidays. But if we move back from the first Monday to the second Monday, particularly for July and September, so I can plan out the year here for possible vacations. So in July, since we're moving the July 4th back to the 10th, will the next meeting be also pushed back, or does that stay the week after as the 3rd, or do we move that to the 4th?
They're shown with these changes in the attachments as you, and just exactly as you're describing.
So they move back 2 weeks also?
No, they
The back-to-back, okay, just checking on that. Okay, just real quick, then on item number 7, I was reading in the staff report that the dealers were not going to have extra costs added in, but in the chart, it showed that one of the vehicles had a $5,000 extra charge from the dealer to, for some reason that was not quantified. So I just thought I'd find out about where that 5,000 was and why it's in there, especially since there was a comment that the dealers were not going to be charging extra for them.
And I think I'd take that one right now and just suggest that that's one we need to refer to staff to answer at a later
Yeah.
date.
Yeah, just things that I'm noticing as I read through the staff reports, just so clarifications I'm looking for, not for any changes or anything, just want to find out new information. And then I just want to make sure that after we purchase these, that there's that the charge stations that we are also being looked at entirely at the same time, so they can be charged, fast charged, and that there'll be enough stations included when that's all done and when they're brought in and ready to be charged up in various locations. Then down on the number 9, the Ellis Creek Tertiary Filtration System. We have a $3 million allocation for the UV light system that's going in, but there's a $20 million overall budget for the next couple of years. And I didn't quite see where the 20, I assume it's for all the piping and things that's going to be done in addition to the UV light system that's going to be put in, but I didn't see a description for the total other $17 million there. And I assume we're just approving for the $3 million.
That's correct.
And then on number 10, the LED lighting upgrade, there was a budget that was set at $500,000, but we were able to get it done under about $90,000, which is a tremendous savings. So I thought I'd find out if that budget is, if that money goes elsewhere, or if it goes, can be used elsewhere, or if there's more projects going to be done with that money that's there, so the leftovers, and if there's more things that need to be done, or if that's the complete project completely done, there's nothing more to be done. So I just thought to compare the 500,000 versus the 90,000. Why the difference? Then, let's see, and then the other thing, it goes on to item 13, which is then goes into the actual agenda items. So there's just quick clarification questions.
So I think we've clarified on most, and regarding the LED lights, that's capital money that stays in capital, and there's always more projects that need done than funding, so it'll go to good use. Would you be comfortable after asking these questions to making the motion for, well, we're not quite to motion, my apologies, but do you have enough clarification?
One
Yeah,
more?
And I was just, if you had
Yeah,
one.
we just want, just on the hybrid meetings on item number 3, because I was with PCA for many years ago, and I do know that running a hybrid meeting like this, and we just heard about the PCAs being more involved. We have several technicians and staff that are participating in meetings like this to make it work. And then if you're adding not just city council, but also all the other subcommittees that might be added in. And yet the staff report said there would be no financial impact, but there seems to be, knowing that this takes more effort by staff to run, I would think there would be a substantial impact on time and money of staff time and salaries, if their salaries are per hour, that there would be actually some financial expenses, because it's a huge effort to do hybrid meetings. Because I've been the tree committee, and we did have Zoom meetings, but it's going hybrid. There is going to be, I think there's going to be a lot more added costs there. So I just thought I'd just find out.
I can actually respond to that, Councilmember Shribs. We are looking right now to see which of our committees and commissions can go hybrid. We're not sure that all of them can, just for a variety of reasons, staffing and costs. So that is not a given. And yes, there is substantial cost for us to run these hybrids. So we are looking at those, but those are not automatically going to go to the committees and commissions.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you. And for the rest of the questions, I can circle back with you after the meeting if you prefer. Yep.
Wonderful. And then let's open the public comment on the consent calendar here. And I know I have one item to speak on, item 11. I'd like to check with the clerk for any online comments that have come in for consent calendar items.
Yes, Mayor McDonald, we received one public comment regarding item 11.
Wonderful.
That is posted online.
And now I'd like to check with our moderator for the Zoom audience.
Thank you, Mayor McDonald. At this point, members of the public wishing to speak on public comment for the consent calendar, please raise your hand in Zoom, and you'll be called on in the order that your hands are raised. Again, speakers are reminded to be respectful in their comments and reminded that this meeting is being translated, so please pause between sentences for translation. Threats of violence and obscenity are grounds for removal from this meeting. A countdown will appear for the convenience of speakers and viewers. Your microphone will be muted at the end of that countdown. So at this point, we have no hands raised, so nothing from the Zoom audience.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'd like to call our in-house person here to speak on the consent calendar items, Richard Braun.
Good evening. Can you hear me all right? Okay, I can't hear myself. Okay. It's a very collegial organization, and it makes it very difficult to come down hard on what you guys are doing or what's happening. But I do have an objection to Petaluma Petaluma City Council and the police feeling that they have any grounds for being in my house and telling me how to handle my firearms. In public places, individual rights defer to the necessity of public safety. I'm for education, safety, and police involvement in those areas. But stay out of my home. One-size-fits-all government approach does not always work, and that's what you're trying to impose. The oral explanation given on December 16th did not distinguish between private property or private home events and public events. I'm going to deal solely with my rights in my own home. In both criminal and civil courts require an act of harm to be shown. Fear is not enough. So where are the documented firearms acts and the specific harm done in your jurisdiction? Where's the meat in this Petaluma hamburger? Again, the audience chronicles events all around the United States, but none in Petaluma. The ordinance refers to the Supreme Court and Ninth Circuit Court decisions as a source of authority, but even the Ninth had to be given documentation to justify the self-defense ruling. But where's the firearms problem in the homes here in Petaluma? Surely one or two events can grace this ordinance. This is treated as an epidemic. So where are the facts to back up the epidemic in gun safety in private homes? 6 such cases would be only 1/100th of 1% of the population upon which you are imposing this. You're aiming this ordinance squarely at me, someone my age and weakness. Do you really think that robbers and gangsters use trigger guards and gun cases? You and I are facing the same problem. How in the world do you stir up facts that do not exist? Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we're closing our public comment on the consent calendar. Coming back to council. And Councilman Healy.
If there's no one else who wants to talk on this on the council, I'm happy to move consent calendar items 1 through 12, plus the council ratification of emergency proclamation that we added to the agenda earlier. And in response to the public commenter, I would say this isn't a Petaluma situation, it's a national situation. We've all been hearing news reports in the last few days of a 6-year-old in Virginia who brought a gun to school and shot his first grade teacher with a gun he found at home. So, it may not happen a lot, but if we can prevent any of those, then this is a good thing to do. Thank you.
Go ahead and,
So,
go ahead.
So that's a motion to for the consent calendar as amended. And I see Councilman Pozeke as our second here. Thank you. So let's move to a roll call vote.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes?
Now,
Here, yes.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll move on to public hearings, matters for consideration. And So this first item, it has to do with tenant protections, and I have recused on this and been advised by legal to recuse on it. More legal opinion is arising, and right now, I need to continue on the side of caution to put myself in recusal on this item. I'll be passing the gavel to our brand-new vice mayor on her first day to carry this motion. Thank you, and I'll be back after.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to play the mayor role my first hour here, but here I am. I'm just going to read the introduction to this ordinance. This is the first reading of an ordinance amending the sunset date of ordinance NO 2823 NCS, adding chapter 6.6 to the Petaluma Municipal Code titled Residential Tenancy Protection until a successor amendment takes effect. And the mayor has left, so I would like to ask staff to do a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks for doing justice to another of our not very catchy agenda item titles in a long list of not very catchy titles. I'm Eric Danley, the city attorney. I'm going to introduce this item with some remarks, and also we're going to hear from our Economic Development and Open Government Director, Ingrid Alverde, and I will mention what the staff recommendation is on this item. Ingrid, if you're able to bring up the PowerPoints, that would be
I
awesome.
do have it. Give me 1 minute because
Sure. I'll buy you
just
some time with
figuring out the
with the
logistics.
staff recommendation, and I'm glad you're doing that and not I, because it would certainly take longer if I did. So the staff recommendation on this item is that the council adopt the ordinance attached to the staff report that would amend the sunset date of ordinance number 2823 NCS, which added chapter 6.60 to the city's municipal code entitled Residential Tenancy Protections, and that would be that amendment or suspension of the sunset date that's currently in the ordinance would be in effect until a successor amendment takes effect. And we included the language finding that this action is not a project under the California Environmental Quality Act. Thank you, Ingrid. Perfect timing. And so if you could bring up the next slide, please. Thanks. So we're going to talk about the background regarding this item, the interim ordinance that the council adopted. Ingrid's going to talk about the outreach that's been done and the further steps for outreach, and also we'll talk about the timeline for those. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Ingrid. Thank you.
Just so you both know, I'm sharing the PowerPoints. If you could just ask me to advance the slide.
Oh, sorry.
Kendall.
I'm sorry. Thanks. Thanks, Kendall. So background, the City Council on May 2nd, 2022, adopted a top 10 list of goals to prioritize those for staff. And one of those was entitled Ellis Act and Just Cause Protections. And this action that the council took in adopting ordinance number 2823 NCS, which added chapter 6.60 to the municipal code, implemented that council priority. That was done on September 12, 2022. And when the council took that action, they adopted the ordinance with a sunset or expiration date of March 1, 2023, meaning on that date, the ordinance would expire, and along with it, the regulations and the tenant protections it includes. During the discussions of the council and deliberations on that legislation, the council expressed a desire that staff would gather public input from stakeholders and data regarding the effects of the ordinance. Normally, ordinances, regular non-urgency ordinances, require 2 readings and take effect 30 days after the second reading. And as a result of that, about 60 days are needed from the introduction of an ordinance for it to become effective. As a result of the March 1, 2023 expiration date of Chapter 6.60, amendments would need to have been introduced tonight for those to be effective before it expires. And that is why the staff recommendation to suspend the sunset. What the effect of the staff recommendation would be to keep the protections in the ordinance in effect until the council is able to give direction on potential amendments. The staff recommendation is in accordance with support that was submitted advocating for that approach from legal aid. That's not to say that the council doesn't have other choices about how to address the potential expiration of the ordinance. But as can be seen from the staff report, and as Ingrid will talk about, what the suspension would do would provide sufficient time for the outreach that the council has requested that staff carry out, for a workshop with the council so that they could give direction from a menu of possible legislative amendments, and then for staff to come back with potential amendments in accordance with the council's direction for its consideration. Next slide, please. And I think we've covered that. Thank you. So at this point, Ingrid is going to talk about the outreach efforts that she's leading. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. I'm just going to back up for a minute and just give you a little background in terms of what staff has been working on since the interim ordinance was adopted in September, because I think it's just important to remember that in addition to doing community outreach to determine what goes into an ordinance, the time it takes us to prepare the educational materials and build out our websites and the myriad of forms that are required, especially in this particular case, as does take several months. So since the ordinance was adopted, we spent quite a bit of time summarizing what was in the ordinance, doing the best we could to clarify what was in and out. It's a fairly complicated set of legislation that has two audiences. Both the tenants and the landlords have sort of different needs, and then all of those informational materials were translated, built out on our website. It's sent out to all of the stakeholders who needed to have that information. So that's also just a bit of the work I wanted to summarize. It's been happening since September. Moving forward, our plan is to hold a series of stakeholder meetings, both with Petaluma People Services, who is our primary provider for fair housing and landlord support, but also with legal aid and other tenant organizations, and also with several property owner and landlord organizations, given that each group has
Ingrid, I'm sorry, can I interrupt for just a moment? I think your audio may have cut out, your microphone. I think just for maybe the last couple sentences, if you could repeat yourself there. Apologies.
Wait, this one came back on.
There, okay.
Probably as I'm talking too fast, the translators are like,
Thank you, sorry
slow
to
down.
interrupt.
Anyways, it's a complicated ordinances with lots of options. So laying that out clearly in a way where you can have a productive conversation is something we've been working on, and we'll be having these workshops in March with the opportunity to survey the community so that we can bring this back to you as a package both with what was adopted in September, with the feedback we've received from the stakeholder groups, as well as the community at large, with a productive discussion around what the opportunities for adoption could be in a new ordinance, if we want to make tweaks to the existing ordinance, if we want to make major changes. Is something we would discuss in early March so that we could then draft an ordinance for your review in April. All with the goal of getting that done, I think, no later than June 1st, ideally earlier than that. We've left ourselves a short window in case we have any meeting issues or any follow-up items that the council would like to discuss. Next slide. So basically, I've just kind of shown you this layout here, but stakeholder meetings January, community workshops February, city council workshop in March, and then bringing back that ordinance in April. That's, I think, the next slide. Eric, you can wrap us up.
Thank you, Ingrid. So as the staff report provides, and as we presented when the ordinance was offered for council action, the Tenant Protection Act, which is currently state law, provides for it limits the bases on which landlords can terminate tenancies. It provides what are referred to as just causes for lawful termination of tenancies, and they fall into two categories: at fault evictions or terminations and no fault. And we've listed those bases here under at fault: default in rent payment, breach of the lease, maintaining a nuisance on the property, criminal activity on the property, or committing waste. Holdover tenants, meaning staying past the expiration of the rental agreement and refusing owner access. And then the no fault lawful bases are withdrawal from the rental market of the property, the owner or their family intending to occupy that unit, and substantial rehabilitation for health and safety reasons to the unit. So that's existing state law under the Tenant Protection Act. Next slide, please. Thank you. I should add too, the Tenant Protection Act provides for state law rent control by limiting the rental increases that are permitted under that law. Now, the city ordinance that the council enacted, and the sunset of which we've been discussing, provides some additional protections, and they're listed here. The noticing of potential action by the landlord under the lease, under the city's ordinance, must be in Spanish as well as English, and if the lease is in a different language from Spanish or English, the noticing must be in that language of the lease. The city's ordinance also provides a right to return at the same rent after rehabilitation of the property. That's one of what are called the Ellis Act protections that the city's ordinance enacts as permitted by the Ellis Act, which addresses the right of landlords to remove their property from the rental market. The city's ordinance also provides for relocation assistance that is owed to tenants who are evicted not for fault of the tenant, and that relocation assistance is equal to 100% of the monthly rent of the unit, or 150% of the monthly rent in cases where the tenant is older than 62, is disabled, there's a child in residence, or the tenant has been a tenant since 2010. Next slide, please. And that concludes our overview of the chapter. We will be having a more in-depth summary for the community members who want to take part in the stakeholder dialogue about what the ordinance does and what options may be considered by the council in the way of amendments, that all of which will be captured in the survey, which will be brought back to the council along with a menu of choices for their direction is our plan. And Ingrid already talked about the timeline, which we feel is necessary for us to carry out that council direction. And just as a reminder, this is before the council tonight, simply regarding the question of whether to keep the existing ordinance in effect while staff carries out the council's public outreach direction, or whether to let the ordinance expire. The council has choices on how, if it wishes to extend the ordinance, how it does that, and we can talk about that if there are council questions. We're not here tonight and have not agendized this item to talk about the substantive terms and potentially have the council change the substantive terms of the ordinance, in part, very much in part because the council direction has been that that shouldn't occur until there's stakeholder dialogue. So that concludes our remarks. Ingrid, do you have anything else to add for the council?
Nope.
No? Sorry, didn't hear it.
No,
So,
thank
so
you.
that concludes our report. Council, happy to address any questions of the council. Thank you.
Council members, go ahead.
Eric, there, in terms of the housing element, okay, oh, I'm sorry. In terms of the housing element, it's page 33, program 29, tenant protection strategies required. What does that mean? Does that just mean we have to do some tenant protection strategy? Does that mean, and under it, we say we're going to pass some tenant protections, but I just wondered, does this affect our ability to procure state money, for example, or anything? Does that, when it says required, that we have to do something in that regard?
So you're reading from the current housing element,
From our housing element.
and it says
proposal.
tenant protection strategies are required, right?
Yes.
Is that- So I think it means that it's a policy statement that means what it says.
I mean, that's
and
the
that
state
council-
saying that, isn't it? The way I read it is that this,
So the programs in the housing element are things that we committed to as a city and saying that we're doing that, which is what we're doing with this
Right.
action.
That's what I was going
Yeah.
to say. This legislative action that the council took and that we're talking about, potentially the council revisiting and amending, is consistent with that policy statement. I'm not sure if.
okay,
Yeah,
I
there's
guess
more
I'm
to your
just
question.
asking if that's, I was confused as to who said that, so it seems like that's just something we're saying we're going to do to help along our housing element.
Absolutely, and we will also, in our new housing element, have updated programs and policies, recommended programs and policies that will go
Okay,
hand in hand
but
with
there's
this.
no direct effect of
No.
that. Okay.
No, remember that the housing element is part of the general plan, which is referred to as a city's constitution regarding land use. And it's a broad policy document that's implemented by the zoning ordinance and other policy documents. So that's guidance in the general plan that the council was implementing by that legislative action.
Okay.
Thank you.
One additional question, in terms of one of the reasons for a just cause eviction is a breach of contract. And again, my understanding would be that the landlord can put anything in there as a breach of contract. Is there any, court case in the past that puts any limitation on what a landlord can list in the contract as a requirement? Like no playing basketball at 11 a.m. on Sunday?
Well, there's nothing that I'm aware of that's that specific, but there are constraints on what are lawful contract terms.
Okay.
And also there are constraints on the formalities of a contract that, the terms have to be, expressed, et cetera. I don't know what else to
Okay.
add about
No,
that, but.
that's fine. Thanks.
Thanks.
Councilmember Healy?
Thank you. So, I was quite surprised when I read the staff report and the proposed ordinance because it wasn't what I was expecting. And I had to go back and look at the tentative agenda that this council or the previous council actually approved at our December 19th meeting. And to refresh people's recollection, the agenda item that was approved for tonight was introduction, first reading of an ordinance providing a 90-day extension of tenant protections. And that's not what we got. We now have an introduction, first reading of an ordinance amending the sunset date, blah, blah, blah. But then when you go back and actually read what's in the ordinance, which is the key thing, Section 3 on page 2 of the ordinance, expiration date of ordinance number 2823 extended. The expiration date of ordinance number 2823 shall no longer be March 1, 2023. Ordinance 2823 in Chapter 6.60 of the Petaluma Municipal Code entitled Residential Tenancy Protections are hereby amended to remain in effect until subsequent amendments to Chapter 6.60 either establish a new expiration date or provide that Chapter 6.60 will continue in effect without an expiration date. That's not a 90-day extension. It's not a 90-year extension. It's a forever extension. And it's masquerading as something that it's not. So I really regard this as underhanded and sneaky and not up to the ethical standards that I'm expecting of city staff. And I'm sorry to have to say that, but I do. I think this undermines the credibility of any credibility of the schedule on page 2, which Ms. Alberti put up on the screen for folks, talking about the schedule of things that we're planning on doing over the next 90 days. I would remind folks that at the September 12 meeting, staff was all in on getting this public outreach work done in time for a March 1 adoption. Nothing has been done. I'm not sure that anything is going to be done in the next 90 days, but if you say it's a permanent extension instead of a 90-day extension, then that removes any incentive for people to actually bring this thing to closure. So I'm sorry to be this rough, but if we were to salvage any tiny shred of credibility with the public on this issue, then I think we need to stick with what the public was told, which is a 90-day extension and not a permanent extension masquerading as an extension. That's not a question. You can respond if you want, but if you think I'm upset, I am. And I think this is not what I expect of staff. Thank you.
City Attorney Danley, can you please respond why it is it doesn't have a sunset date and what the intention was, and that staff has no intention of extending it beyond what we have in the outreach schedule?
Sure. Thanks, Peggy. So I really tried to be clear. We tried to be clear in the materials, and I tried to be clear in my remarks tonight about what we're presenting and why. And that is that, you know, as presented, if we're done sooner, then those amendments will take effect sooner. The council, when I said that the council has other options for an extension, if they choose to approve an extension, one of them would certainly be to amend the sunset date so that it is extended by 90 days from the current date. That's fine. That's why we presented what we did. I also mentioned in my remarks that that what's presented tonight is been something that the legal aid folks have recommended, so it does track to that, but it's the council's prerogative if they wish to extend this. There's certainly no intention for subterfuge or to be underhanded. We tried to be very clear about what's before the council and its options to do nothing and let the protections expire, or to suspend the sunset date, or something else like a finite extension for 90 days if that's the council's wish. All of those are easily done. We have all the incentive in the world to accomplish the outreach that the council has directed us to do, at least by the time that we've projected in the schedule, and that is we have the council's direction to do that. So,
And that's in March, to bring it back to council in March.
right. So
We're not way off our schedule.
right. So as we summarize in the staff report, the public workshop meeting with the council to present the survey results and have public input and present a menu of options which the council wanted, not in the form of finalized legislation, but a menu of options to give direction to staff and to really be directing the legislative and policymaking process. That's estimated, scheduled for March 6th, with potential first reading of amendments March 20th, second reading April 3rd, and a May 3rd effective date. So that's the schedule, and that's our recommendation for following through on the council direction we believe we received. And as I mentioned, we're ready and willing to take whatever the council's direction is if it does or doesn't want to extend the protections of the ordinance while a public outreach process and stakeholder dialogue process occurs, or not. That's absolutely the council's prerogative, and there's no intention on my part or any of staff's part to suggest otherwise. So I'd be happy to answer further questions or elaborate. Thank you.
Councilmember Shribs?
Thank you. I did the reading also, and I would agree with Councilmember Healy that for the extension date, I was expecting to see an extension and not a forever clause basically in there. So I'd agree with Councilmember Healy with that sentiment that he has about that. So I would like to see an actual date, like Councilman Barnacle was the original one at the first meeting, proposed an extension date and more specific, a specific deadline date to get things done. There is a calendar here that goes through May 3rd for amendments effective date as the target date, which may get shifted a little bit depending on how things flow. So I would like to see a recommendation of an actual a date set rather than a forever extension put on this. Maybe suggest a June 1 to at least May 3rd, if that's when the effective date is expected, that we need to at least get ourselves covered till June 1. And the other thing that I don't see in this whole schedule is looking at other cities. We are not the first and only city in California doing this. And I know others, my mom was back in Santa Monica in 1980, was able to stay in rent-controlled apartments as one of the first cities in the California to have established pretty strong laws for rent control. And she was able to stay there for 20 years with rent control on small Social Security. So I'm in favor of rent control, but the current things that we have now in this emergency, things to be pretty stiff and severe. And landlords, I think I also a little bit in favor of what they're also saying, some of the pressures and issues that they have. There is some needs and some rights that they also need to be respected. Because I remember back, even in my family, both my grandparents and uncles were in the landlord business and lost their shirts, lost their business. They even got kicked out of their homes and got at one point. So I know it's either way, it's pretty severe things that are happening within families. And especially I'd like to possibly look at maybe differentiating mom and pops versus corporations. We have lots of large structures going in owned by corporations that are not going to be hurt here or there by one or two units here and there. But the mom and pops, and I understand 41% is what I heard of our houses here are being rented. And most of those are actually owned by prior owners and live-ins. So folks in our age group, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, who have one or two homes that they lived in, that they turned into rentals, and that is their egg nest. And they are wanting to, and their kids have moved out of state, and they're wanting to move out of state, but they can't because their egg nest is tied up in this one or two houses. So I would like to make sure that we do maybe differentiate between mom and pops with one and two homes versus corporations. So make sure that those things get differentiated in the stakeholder meetings, that those when we reach out. And I also want to make sure we survey, what's not in the schedule, is surveying all the other cities that are dealing with the exact same issues that we are right here, right now. We're not the one and only. So there's got to be other cities that may be ahead of us, have already got this done, and we may be able to use those as models and have a much faster process here, educate, and have a model that's already done and provided for us by other cities who are ahead of us on this. So I want to make sure we have other cities and look at what other cities are doing right now. I'd be surprised if we were the first ones to actually implement these things. And being an emergency type of settings because of COVID and economies. So we need to continue what we have right now, but I would think we need to have a termination date that says we really need to be fair to both, also the landlords too. At some point, they do have their own issues. And that's my feedback on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Now?
Well, Councilmember Shribs, you must have been reading my notes because I had about the same kind of thing to say about the large unit apartments versus the people who just own 1 or 2 units and that's their retirement. And how we meet with those stakeholders, the landlords, we really don't know how to answer a lot of questions because they want to know things like what happens to the current contracts that they have with their tenants. They ask for first and last and cleaning deposit. What happens now that we have this ordinance when we have it in place? What happens? Do they go back and rewrite all their contracts with their tenants? There's a lot of questions, and we want to protect the landlords and the tenants. And the tenants, there's good and there's bad, and there's good and bad landlords. So we really want to make sure that those stakeholders are heard and spoke to and listened to and bring it back. And like Councilmember Shrib said, we want to make sure that we look at the other cities and what they are doing and make sure that Petaluma shines. So thank you.
Are there any other council comments? Questions?
We're just doing questions right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to hold my comments.
Then we're going to move on to public comment.
Madam Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Just, can I briefly respond to
Absolutely.
those items? Thank you.
Please.
Just briefly, we've been keeping a running list since the council meeting when the council adopted the ordinance on potential amendments, including the small property owner exemption. We've also received suggestions about reducing the duration of the Ellis Act protections, a number of other things. We expect we'll hear more in the stakeholder process. That's really the purpose of it, to gather those and any other feedback we receive. We looked at a number of other examples. Ours is the first ordinance like this in Sonoma County, but we looked at a number of other ordinances in bringing this. I don't know, at least half a dozen, maybe more. And that's where the provisions came from, because we were checking to make sure they were lawful, they'd worked, and you know, we're addressing some of those policy considerations. For example, providing some protection so that teachers and students' school years weren't disrupted, et cetera. So I wanted to briefly respond with respect to that. In terms of the duration, as I mentioned, if the council prefers a 90-day extension in accordance with the draft agenda that Councilmember Healy referred to, that would take us through May. The projected schedule we talked about would actually show an effective date for amendments sooner than that, in the very beginning of May, by May 3rd. So again, that's at the council's discretion, and we fully recognize and respect that those are choices to be made by the council. Thank you.
And I would just add that our tentative workshop gets us to that 90 days. Our schedule does, so.
Thank you very much. We're going to open the public comment now, and the public is invited to make comments on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. And I'm going to ask the city clerk if she's received any comments prior to the meeting.
Yes, Madam Vice Mayor, we received 2 comments prior to the meeting, which are posted online with the agenda packet.
Thank you. Now I'm going to ask the moderator to read instructions for those on Zoom.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. At this time, members of the public wishing to speak to this specific item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in the turn. And just a reminder to be respectful and that threats of violence or obscenity are grounds for removal from the meeting. And if you do not stick to this specific topic, your microphone will be muted and you may lose some or all of your remaining time. And please, just a reminder, this is being broadcast simultaneously in Spanish, so please include pauses between your sentences. And Vice Mayor, I'm not sure if we have any members of the public that have given you cards there, but we currently have 2 hands raised in Zoom.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, I do have cards. And I'm going to call Keith Becker.
Good evening. I have a speech, but I think that Mike Healy said it better than I could. As did Karen, as did John. I envy, and don't fool yourself, legal aid is a stakeholder in this issue. And I envy them the opportunity that they can influence this ordinance. I'm a stakeholder, and my representation tonight, I'm here on behalf of NARPM, the National Association of Residential Property Managers. I'm here on behalf of the Governmental Affairs Director of NORBAR. I'm here on behalf of dozens of owners for whom I manage properties in Petaluma. And the fact is, if you want a dog, ask for a pony. What we've got here, this ordinance, and I don't think that this idea of putting it out there indefinitely was a mistake. I think it was intentional because nobody is looking at terminating this. This is going to go on. Everybody is agreeing it's going to go on. And now it's a matter of how long will it be, not will we or will we not. I do believe that 90 days, the fact is, here we are. It's January 9th, and we're here 2 months before a May expiration. The fact is that we could push it out to the end of May, and we'll be back in a month asking for more time. I agree. That's 90 days was on the tentative agenda. 90 days might not be enough. Theoretically, if everybody does their job, sure. But there should be stakeholder meetings. I certainly hope you do a better job going forward in terms of stakeholder meetings than what you've done to date. And one thing that Ingrid said basically earlier was that landlords and tenants have different needs, and I would disagree with that because landlords and tenants have a mutual need and a mutual interest, and both landlords and tenants are intent on protecting the stock of quality, affordable rental housing in Petaluma and throughout all of Sonoma County. But the fact is that draconian measures will actually diminish the amount of inventory in Sonoma County, will diminish the amount of inventory in Petaluma, and will chase constituents into other areas where they can find housing and where owners can invest their properties and not feel like they're being beaten on. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Johnson?
Hello, my name's Corey Johnson. I'm a Petaluma resident and renter. And, oh, sorry. Maybe I should take this off. Okay. I'm a Petaluma resident and renter, and I'd like to say I'm privileged to say that I'm privileged because I'm renting from one of those small landowners. So it's a small house in Petaluma. And in the 6 years I've lived there, they've never raised the rent. The woman died, but her children haven't raised the rent. They are not, they're using it for income, but not, they're getting what they need out of it, I guess. But I'm privileged because I'm able to live in a small house versus a big complex, because I can afford that. So anyway, I'm glad that you decided to devote the first meeting of this year to address the future of this ordinance. It was a 2-year effort to get the ordinance passed and ensure its protections until March of this year. However, these protections, oops, wrong side. Wait, I'm glad. It was a cooperative effort to get the ordinance passed and ensure its protections. As a member of the North Bay Organizing Project, I've talked with many renters who are struggling with their housing needs, high rents, lack of landlord response to safety concerns, and extra charges beyond their rent. Many of them were not aware of the ordinance, but were happy to learn of the protections they now have. It is evident that the indefinite continuation of this ordinance is necessary for many renters and their families to address the power imbalance between renters and landlords. Please vote to put families' needs over profit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tom Munder.
Good evening, council members and Mayor O'Donnell, wherever you are. My name is Tom Monder. I live in a 6-unit building in downtown Petaluma, and I'm the definition of a mom and pop landlord. For 35 years, I have cleaned, repaired, and provided apartments at below market rents. I treat my tenants with fairness and respect. When things are broken, I fix them. When there are problems, we communicate. Instead of enjoying the national championship football game, I'm here because after reading this 20-page document a second time, in good conscience, it is important for me to look you each in the eye and caution that this ordinance is reckless. It is a reckless, meddlesome, half-baked undertaking that does little to solve Petaluma's rental problems. I understand your intentions are good. You want to achieve fairness for vulnerable tenants by restricting no-fault evictions. You want to check a box off your top 10 to-do list. But this is not the solution. Market conditions have changed. Let's let this law sunset or give it a thoughtful rewrite. I do not have a problem with negotiating a fair payment to a displaced tenant at the time a unit is vacated. But I do think it is overreach to restrict what an owner may do with his real estate for up to 10 years later. 10 years? Come on. The plain fact is there will always be a few unscrupulous landlords. And you cannot legislate ethics or manners. By approving this ordinance, you are interfering with market forces of supply and demand that are frankly beyond your sphere of competence. In your zeal to be woke, you are inadvertently hurting small landlords who are already the ethical backbone of this community. Your actions tonight will affect the value of my largest asset, my nest egg, my home, and my livelihood for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Karen Sanchez.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Karim Sanchez. I'm with the North Bay Organizing Project and the Sonoma County Tenants Union. I want to first congratulate the new City Council members and the Mayor McDonald, who's also somewhere. And I want to speak in support of the extension for the Just Cause Ordinance. I also want to express gratitude for the invitation to the stakeholder meetings. But I did want to voice that the invitation that we received for the stakeholder meeting, if I believe it was from 1 to 3 p.m., and a lot of one of the main stakeholders that we've identified and that's been said, teachers who are protected by this ordinance, that time would be difficult for them to get to. So I want to consider negotiating a time change if possible to accommodate working folks who rent to also be there and voice their needs. And also we talk to a lot of Spanish speakers who are also wanting to give their opinion on this ordinance. So I want to extend an invitation to you all to potentially coordinate with us to make sure that there's language accessibility at these stakeholder meetings. Also, wanted to let the new city council members know that we've been here for a long time, 2 years, trying to get this protection to happen, and we want to reach out to you to have a little bit of a conversation with you to let you know what has gone into this. So expect a follow-up from us, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Chad Bola?
Good evening, council members. My name is Chad Bola, and I'm a renter and a tenant organizer who believes that all humans, regardless of their economic and social status, deserve safe and dignified housing. I want to stop right there and just, I want to highlight, we're hearing a lot about stakeholders, right? And let's just be honest, not all stakeholders are equal. It's a different conversation when we're talking about a family of renters facing eviction, potentially being put into the street, compared to someone that's losing out on an investment that they chose to make. People don't choose to be renters. They're in that situation. That's why they're renters. In fact, most people would prefer to own their own home, first and foremost, to get out from underneath the thumb of a landlord. So I just want you to consider that. So, close to 2 years ago, the North Bay Organizing Project and its Housing Justice Branch, the Sonoma County Tenants Union, embarked on our campaign for just cause evictions in Petaluma. We did this because it had been our on-the-ground experience engaging with Petaluma renters that their greatest fear was that of being evicted, banished to the street despite their contributions to the economy. We also heard this time and time again from tenants who called our hotline. The stress connected to this fear is bad for individual and collectible health. You all know that. Working people, essential workers were and still are getting hammered from all directions, insecure employment due to COVID, loss of wages, yet rent and bills are still due. Yes, there was financial support offered to tenants, and some received that support with great gratitude, but the fact remained that the debt, those bills, did not disappear, and at a certain point, the reality of potential eviction is hard to ignore. We are here right now in this space, and there are thousands of people in the streets that are clamoring for shelter. We could and should do much better for our community members. So I'm asking that you vote to extend this ordinance until an amended ordinance takes effect. We will continue to engage and offer the tenant perspective, but it's our hope that we leave tonight able to rest and not have fear of a sunset date. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Terry?
Hey everybody, my name is Michael Tatone. I'm a member of the Sonoma County Tenants Union. I support just cause protections for tenants. And I'm really grateful that this council actually, got this ordinance in place last year under short notice, knowing that tenants were going to lose out on protections. I think it really says that there's genuine care for tenants on this council. I support a removal of the sunset clause in this ordinance so tenants can have greater assurance that they're protected for now. And I wanted to say that, we're in the midst of an immense storm, and it reminds a lot of us that not having a roof is a really critical health concern for members of this community. With our changing environment, shifting the results based on, caused by climate change, we're at even more of a point where we need to be reassessing our values. We should support just cause eviction protections because an eviction without cause is someone drenched in the rain without cause. An eviction without cause is someone in the freezing cold without cause. An eviction without cause is residents who won't speak up about landlord abuses due to the fear of something over which they have no control. And an eviction without cause is a renter forced to leave Sonoma County without cause. And I think we have to be better than that as a community. There's no doubt that this ordinance could be better. There's many people who aren't in the room and haven't been, and they should be heard. If efforts to hear more from stakeholders in the communities are to be genuine, these workshops and stakeholder meetings need to be available to 9 to 5 workers and non-English speakers, people who often can't make a 1 to 3 p.m. meeting on a work day. And, you know, we've heard from a lot of folks acting like landlords haven't had a voice in this community and that they're the underdogs. And I just think that's bizarre. I think it says a lot more about personal biases rather than the objective realities about a tenant-landlord relationship and their relationship with, and politically in the community. Tenants are by and large underrepresented in these spaces, and the stake which they have on the issue is extremely understated. Losing out on a home is devastating. And, you know, those of us who have been out in the community these last couple weeks have been trying to help people get supplies they need to get out of the rain. It's not, you can't say how bad it is. So please, sorry, consider these things tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clayton Ingstrom?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, newly elected officials. Thank you for indulging us in this. I've been a landlord since I was 20 years old, so that's 43 years. I own several rentals, all on the west side of Petaluma. I spend a lot of my reserve income that I make from my job, I put into my rentals. I spend a lot of my spare days and weekends, and I spent all day today working on rentals. I love my tenants, absolutely love them. It is a wonderful symbiotic relationship that I have, that you as a housing provider have, and a duty to the law. What these people are speaking about when they talk about housing insecurity, man, it's because this town is doggone expensive. This ordinance makes it a whole lot more expensive. Some of the things that are in this ordinance that don't really come to light is this is talking about creating a rental registry. You know, the city of Berkeley has a rental registry. It costs $4 million a year to administer. That does not provide one housing unit, one subsidy. You're not protecting anything. The system works just fine. There was no burning desire. We were not going off a cliff anywhere to establish this thing to begin with. Let this thing die. I want the city of Petaluma to engage the stakeholders, myself included, because guess what? I've been in this community since 1966. When you talk about a stakeholder, I'm the guy born, bred into this thing, and it's very aggravating that my years of dedication now is getting all screwed up because you guys are screwing with I don't screw with your retirement, and I feel that's what's happening here. I would love to sit down. I have tried to engage. I engaged Councilmember Barnacle, Councilmember Posake. I look forward for the opportunity, Councilmember Shribs. I spoke with Healy and Cater Thompson also, Councilmember, Vice Mayor Thompson, Cater Thompson. I would love to sit down. I would love for you guys to walk a mile in my shoes to understand how I care about tenants. I want them protected. This thing, let's start from scratch. You've done it all backwards. You should have had the survey, figure out what we're trying to stop first. You know, with AB 1482 in the state of California, that went a huge way to remedy some of the issues that were taking place. Any landlord that has a substandard unit, there are laws for that. Doggone it. And what everybody else is talking about, not getting their rent raised, that's because of a good landlord. And none of these policies are going to make rent any cheaper or stop.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank you very much. Is it Aurora Aguilar?
Hello. Good evening. Welcome, new city council members. Thank you for making this a priority in your first meeting of the year. My name is Aura Aguilar. Thank you for trying. I am a renter in Petaluma, and I'm on the board of the Sonoma County Tenants Union. I'm urging you to please vote to extend the ordinance until an amended ordinance takes effect. Petaluma is my husband's hometown and a place we've called home for so long. We love living here. But being a renter in Petaluma is scary. The flooding and road closures near our small granny unit on the west side has made me really think about the security of our housing. As I'm sure it's made a lot of people think about the security of their housing. We already feel insecure because we know that our renter protections are not permanent, and if we get evicted, we would have to leave Petaluma because it's too expensive to live here. It's incredibly frustrating that we have had to fight so hard for every single basic protection for renters, and I've talked to so many other renters in Petaluma who are also frustrated, who are also scared. These are basic renter protections, and no, Petaluma would not be the first city to implement these protections. You've heard from many landlords in past meetings and here today who you know, and I know, would have no problem evicting tenants the second this ordinance is over. And it's on you if you're gonna let that happen. Evictions are violent, they're unsafe, they're unhealthy, and I think we deserve better. We deserve a better Petaluma, one that prioritizes protections for renters who make up so much of our community here. I wanna be proud of the city where I live, and I don't wanna live anywhere where we think that evictions are okay. Extending the ordinance would make it so that we feel stable and safe in our community and in our home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Diana Kingsbury.
Good evening. My name is Diana Kingsbury, and I'm a renter and an organizer with North Bay Organizing Project and Sonoma County Tenants Union. I'd like to welcome the City Council members and congratulations on your elections. As was stated in the staff report, just cause policies can prevent displacement and promote tenant stability. I want to emphasize the importance of this for children in particular. According to a longitudinal study of over 2,500 children published in 2020 by Lifeheight et al., evicted children versus not had over twice the prevalence of food insecurity at age 5. Another key excerpt from that study, recent sociological evidence suggests that eviction is not merely a symptom of adverse social conditions, but a cause of future adversity, both short and long term. Because evictions carry a lasting legal record, a single eviction can prevent a family from accessing quality, affordable housing in a desirable neighborhood years later. This evidence suggests that a child who experiences an eviction early in life may be on a trajectory to experience a set of health-related exposures leading to health disparities. The study was conducted by social scientists from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg Schools of Public Health and Public Medicine. Among others, it stated that interventions to prevent eviction can protect children from hunger and adversity. I really appreciated Councilmember Now's comment that Petaluma teenagers today will someday become Petaluma City Council members themselves. I truly hope that all current Petaluma children and teenagers can grow up without the disruption and instability of being unjustly evicted, allowing them the opportunity to eventually get involved in the political process and even running for office themselves. And you can all help give them that future. In addition, the staff report alludes to the climate impacts of homelessness, but I also want to bring up the climate impacts of eviction-driven displacement leading to longer commutes to work, which is, as we think about climate impacts, really important consideration, transportation. Again, thinking about our future here. We do know that our work is cut out for us. It is very much a power imbalance between landlords and tenants. Many tenants have jobs, they have multiple jobs, they have families, children. Childcare is very expensive these days. And also there can be barriers around like translation, for example, and language barriers. I appreciate all the efforts to include more translation in these meetings, but also, there have been times when people have showed up and there was no translation in person, for example. So there's these sort of barriers that make participation more difficult. And like Councilmember Shribs, I have a lot of questions about the meetings coming up. I'm really looking forward to participating in these meetings, but I'm really curious if there will be live translation in all these meetings, both in person and virtual, as well as having an accessible time of day. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Patrick McDonald?
Hi, everyone. My name is Patrick McDonald. I'm a housing attorney with Legal Aid of Sonoma County. Wanted to offer my congratulations to the new council members. I'm the son and grandson of landlords. I'm a 7th generation Sonoma County resident. this community matters a lot to me. And I know that because I've been to a lot of these meetings, I know that something that often gets talked about is who is this ordinance protecting, not who is AB 1482 protecting, who does existing state law protect. So let me give you a couple of examples from my caseload of the past couple of months. So I have two cases. One is a quadplex, the other is a triplex right here in Petaluma. In the case of the quadplex, the folks that came to me, there's two tenants, one of whom has a disability. They were given a notice that they had to leave on 60 days under AB 1482 because the landlord intended to, quote unquote, withdraw from the rental market. Now, the reason for withdrawal is the landlord was selling the quadplex. And to create more favorable terms of sale, the landlord decided everyone needs to go. We're going to sell the property to an investor, and the investor will rent out the quadplex as he or she deems fit. Because that notice was given about 3 or 4 days prior to the passage back in September, I believe, of the initial ordinance, they were not protected by the ordinance's terms. And I had to tell these folks who had heard of the ordinance that in fact it didn't apply to them. They were going to have to move out in the 60 days or risk an eviction on their record and the hit to their credit. I have another case of a triplex, also right here in Petaluma. In that case, the notice was given after the ordinance was passed. In that case, one of the units, one of the folks that came to me, it's a family of 4, monolingual Spanish speaking, very active here in the Petaluma community. The difference is because now they are protected by the ordinance, they have options, right? In both of these cases, the quadplex and the triplex, this is fundamentally rental housing. This is not going to be somebody buys this up. They decide it's a nice place for them to raise their family here in Petaluma. This is an investment decision. And the question here faced by the city council, at least as it applies to these two examples that I'm mentioning, is whether or not every single time one of these properties changes hands, do we need to displace 3 or 4 Petaluma families in order to allow for the exchange? Your ordinance, as it happens, or as it is currently written, protects that latter case. It ensures that they have options, they have more time to move out, they have relocation assistance, and also a sale doesn't in and of itself constitute withdrawal. It would have applied to that former case, and it would have given all those tenants options. So I encourage you to please pass an extension of the ordinance until such time as a new ordinance might take its place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura Talent.
Hi, my name is Laura Talent, and I am born and raised Sonoma County, proud Trojan alumni, and I'm here not necessarily to speak against the ordinance. I definitely think some needs to be changed within it, but I am here to hope to invoke reevaluation of the ordinance. I believe that this ordinance was written with good intent. I fear, though, that intent would not be fulfilled if it is passed. And I think that things that we are hearing here are really dividing the landlords and the tenants, and I don't think that's necessary in this situation. I want to see us all come together as in a community and improve in solidarity. Landlords do have to be a part of this equation because we don't have homes to rent if we don't have landlords. And I think that's something that is necessary to be a part of the conversation and how they are also impacted in this decision making. So I do speak on behalf of the landlords as well within this situation because I do come from a family of landlords as well, and I see how their livelihood can be affected, but also more so, I don't want it to be that these landlords are rolling in the big bucks, collecting money, kicking their feet up. To have an investment property, however it is that they have it, homes do not maintain themselves. They take a lot of money to keep up on upkeep of it. There are laws to make sure the habitability is there, and we have an incredible resource if someone is not up to par, and thank goodness we do. But it's very easy to see an owner be in the negative on one of their properties by simply having to do a roof, or just with the insurance money going up, and costs of repairs nowadays, ever since the pandemic, have skyrocketed. Property taxes, insurance, and maintenance are always on the rise there. And we need to make sure that we do have an incentive for our local mom and pops who do own, like it was mentioned before, 1 or 2 properties, that they keep that. And most of our homes here are actually single family. We don't have nearly the same capacity of the multi-units, unless we're talking about the large complexes, which are not a part of this conversation today. So the incentives is this ordinance, I fear, I've said it before, it can make someone glaze over. They don't know how to read it, they don't know how to interpret it, and it feels like they put them in a corner. And we saw this with the pandemic, where a lot of owners ended up selling. And again, with them being single family homes, they didn't go to investors. They went to single family homes, and they were off the rental market. And we are already in a crisis of homes for our, not only our homes, but with our renters as well. So we need to make sure that we are looking at the full picture here. And I'm out of time, but thank you.
Thank you very much. Carrie Davidson?
Thank you. I apologize that some of you have to hear me again because we've already talked a couple times about the unfairness, in my opinion, of this housing ordinance. I live and work in Petaluma and own Mahoney Davison Property Management for over 31 years. We manage about 500 residential units, mostly in Petaluma, and of those 500 units, we have approximately 380 clients. So you can see that's maybe the average, of the vast majority of my clients own one property. They're not corporate landlords. I also want to say, because I hear so much about evictions and the fear of evictions, in the last 20 years, we've done 2 evictions. And if you mean taking it all the way to court. So in our world, we don't see that happening. There's fairness on both sides. We have good tenants, we have good landlords. And this ordinance is not about habitability, it's not about homelessness, it's not about rent control or escalating rents. It's about fairness to tenants and landlords. But my primary concern for the landlords of Petaluma, as well as the citizens of Petaluma, is the way the city manager, city attorneys and staff, and the prior council chose to handle this issue. Without experience in this field, our paid staff chose to wing it, in my opinion, as they'd been pressured to get an ordinance in place quickly and without due diligence in researching the perceived problems. I don't feel the ordinance will serve to benefit either landlord or tenants. When the city attorneys proposed the existing ordinance, local community property managers and landlords came together and paid to have a real estate attorney review the ordinance. After careful and thoughtful examination, a letter was sent to the council and staff disputing the recommendations and offering alternatives to consider. The letter apparently went unread and did not get the courtesy of an acknowledgement or a response. To vote tonight on an extension of this ordinance without any effort in the past 3 months on the part of the city to better understand the ramifications to local landlords is irresponsible. It needs to be revised with equal opportunities for input, particularly for those who provide the necessary housing for the tenants you're trying to protect. The existing ordinance is complicated, unclear, and impossible to navigate for the average mom and pop landlord. The staff has spent countless hours putting together forms and disclosures that are going unused because owners aren't even aware of them. I get a call every day or so from landlords asking whether they can sell their property or give their tenant notice to move in a family member. Even landlord attorneys cannot assist in advising their clients since the city has taken away property rights. Landlords cannot bear more financial burdens relating to their hard-earned investments. And
I'm sorry, your time has expired.
It's impractical to...
I'm sorry, your time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Sunny, is it Nye?
Good evening, Council. My name is Sunny No. I am a career legal services tenants rights attorney. I am also a renter in Petaluma in newly elected council member now's district. I live in a single-family home that I rent month to month with my partner and my 2 young kids. I strongly support the draft ordinance included in Agenda Item 13. This ordinance, as many of these advocates said tonight and these tenants said tonight, did not come overnight. It came on the backs of 2 years of work on behalf of tenants and tenant organizers and their advocates. One of the prior speakers spoke about the unfair impact or access that Legal Aid had to this council. Let me just be clear. We are a nonprofit legal services community service. We serve the county of Sonoma. We serve the most vulnerable members of this county. As my colleague Patrick pointed out, those are who we speak on behalf of. We have no personal interest. We have no profit-based interest. We speak on behalf of your constituents who can't be here to speak for themselves. I also want to be clear, this ordinance does not prohibit landlords from being able to evict tenants. It simply affords basic rights to tenants like myself. It provides tenants with more stability and more equity. It allows tenants like myself, not just like myself who come from a household with 2 salaried incomes, but the tenants who make up the fabric of this community, including those who work in our restaurants, those who work in my children's daycares, the teachers in these public schools, those who take care of our elderly, those who work in hospitals, those who frankly work the kind of hours that prohibit them from being here to speak on behalf of themselves. It gives them the kind of protection from arbitrary eviction that we as tenants need. If we have landlords who are having no issues with their tenants and have rarely had to evict tenants, that's wonderful. But I will tell you clearly, I have been doing this work for 13 years, and I have been a tenant for 13 years, and I have routinely been afraid to exercise my rights, despite my own knowledge of my rights and my ability to litigate on my own behalf. I have had a 2-week-old baby in an unheated apartment because I knew that everything was fine, but as soon as I made an issue of this, I was going to be subject to a notice of eviction. And so I just really want to reiterate that this does not take away the rights of landlords to evict tenants. It just provides some equity in the power balance for tenants to allow people like myself and so many of your most vulnerable constituents to be able to actually live here with some semblance of stability. I also want to point out that homelessness is a crisis that we are all committed to, and tenant protections are one of the best ways to reduce.
Thank you very much. That was the last speaker, so I'm going to turn it over to the moderator.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Our first speaker on Zoom is Margaret DeMatteo. Margaret, I will allow you to speak. You may unmute yourself and begin your comments.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Margaret DeMatteo. I am the Housing Policy Attorney at Legal Aid of Sonoma County. I want to congratulate the new City Council members and look forward to working together on improving the ordinance. I do want to clarify that Legal Aid provided a recommendation prior to the last City Council meeting in December as part of our regular public comments in writing and verbally. A recommendation for an extension until amendments can be adopted was rejected when the council voted to present a 90-day extension. There was no further advocacy by Legal Aid until today when I submitted a public comment through the city's website on agenda item 13. This was not included with the other written comments tonight, but I'm happy to resubmit it via email instead. What it says was, on behalf of Legal Aid of Sonoma County, I write to express support for the draft ordinance included with agenda item 13. It is important that the community be able to rely on the law as passed while the comprehensive community outreach proposed by city staff is pursued. The ordinance being discussed tonight is the result of a 2-year campaign, and these tenant protections did not come easy. Thank you for making this a priority in your very first meeting of the year. Legal Aid commends the city for its commitment to making Petaluma a place that renters can call home without fear of arbitrary eviction. And to second, what my colleague Sunny said, it's not that landlords cannot evict. We're not taking that right away from them. What we're doing is saying that they can't evict for no reason. And so for landlords that only commenced 2 evictions in court in the last 20 years, this ordinance isn't going to hamstring them. But I do agree that it is hard to read, and there are changes that could be made to make it easier for landlords to comply and for tenants to understand what their rights are. And that's what these workshops are needed for. And that's what was intended when it was adopted. This was adopted by the City Council last year after over a year of votes and more votes to adopt an ordinance. And it was adopted with the intention of putting in a sunset date because it wasn't perfect, because we needed to come back to the table. I don't know how successful a roundtable with landlords and tenants will be. I've been in this field for 10 years. There is a power imbalance at that table. But I do think that the workshops will be helpful in refining the ordinance and making it more clear. And I do commend city staff for putting together a schedule that's reasonable and comprehensive. And I ask you to vote to allow that process to happen tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Paige Delberg, followed by Zaira. Paige, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening, and thank you, Vice Mayor and members of the council. My name is Paige, and I am a third-generation Petaluma renter here speaking tonight, representing myself. I'm really grateful to be a part of this community and as well as living on land that has been cared for by the Coast Miwok and Southern Pomo. The TPA AB 1482, the definition of a no-fault eviction has some pretty major loopholes. And I know this because, unfortunately, I fell into one. I have been able to comment before, and tonight I will share that the costs, the dollar cost as well as the stress of the threat of eviction has absolutely had a huge impact on the trajectory of my life here in Sonoma County, where I was born and raised. When we were compelled by our mom and pop landlord to self-evict from a single family home in order to sell to an investor with more attractive terms. This happened to my partner and I 3 weeks before the ordinance was adopted in September. And I am so grateful that things have changed. I wanted to note that I've had the privilege of making some other investment choices, not land, but I have made them with the understanding that the returns on those investments are not guaranteed. However, I do not have a choice. I do need a home. Part of the reason why we pushed to stay in Petaluma was because this ordinance was a priority for the city council. And I really want to reiterate the gratitude of others to this council for taking this up on your first public item. I encourage you to follow the staff recommendations and remove the sunset, leaving the current ordinance in place. This ordinance is compassionate, and I thank you for keeping it a part of our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Our next speaker is Zaira, followed by Blake Hooper. Zaira, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Thanks, Patrick. Are you able to hear me? Just want to confirm that.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I just want to say Happy New Year and congratulations to the newly elected city council members. I'm also a renter in District 3. Just want to highlight that owning a home is actually a privilege. It would be nice for myself to own a home, but of course, I'm not able to do so. So as we see that climate change disasters hurt and impact our working and poor immigrants, just to highlight that when renters lose their belongings in a flood, because these storms have caused a lot of distress, I'm actually helping out with Sonoma County COED, and I can't tell you all of the stories that we've been hearing, at least across the county, with their garages falling, trees falling on homes. Not a lot of renters are going to have a lot of aid, specifically our undocumented community. So FEMA, though it might be a great resource for some, it does not provide aid for our undocumented community. And even, we talk about that landlords haven't had a chair at the table. I just want to remind you that when the Tubbs fire happened, Little Woods Mobile Villa, their landlord wanted to increase by 30%, and that was the start of the conversation of just cause eviction. So these workshops, this conversation, it isn't new. It hasn't happened. It's been happening. And as you have seen from the fires up until now, it is still a problem. And by you all voting tonight on extending will help improve and provide at least some relief. So I just wanted to give that. Thanks so much, and have a good night.
Thank you for those comments. Our next speaker is Blake Hooper. Blake, you may unmute and begin your comments.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, for taking up this issue on this first meeting. My name is Blake, and I'm a renter who was born and raised here. I've rented from wonderful small community landlords, but I've experienced those that made every day incredibly difficult and made staying here increasingly uncertain. Renters have been struggling and continue to struggle in this city. And while this doesn't create more housing, it helps us do something to help protect the community that is trying so hard each day just to hang on here. I ask that whatever action you take today, you prioritize current protections not expiring before there's an extension in place or an amended ordinance. Many renters in this community did grow up here and are just as invested in the success of this community as a homeowner or a landlord. Please don't deprioritize the needs of renters in this process. And finally, please keep in mind that these protections are no more onerous or complicated than what many other cities, many in fact that are smaller than ours, have passed in the state of California. Thank you.
And thank you for that comment, and thank you to all speakers. Madam Vice Mayor, that is our last hand raised.
Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment and bring it back to the City Council for comments. Brian?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor, and thank you to all the public comments. In my zeal to be woke, to use one of the commenters' terms, we put a sunset on it because it was imperfect, but because we wanted to protect renters. We haven't done the outreach. I think that probably the reason why the 90 days was removed from this staff report or from the ordinance is probably because if it goes 91 days before it goes into effect, we have to come back here again and do this whole dog and pony show again, and that's more time out of all your schedules. So I don't think there was any ill will or nefarious alternatives here, at least none that I'm aware of. I want to keep the sunset clause in there because I think it does send the right message to the community that there are problems with the ordinance, and I want to fix those. I agree there needs to be a thoughtful rewrite. I think that we need to extend it. Part of the situation is that we don't have good data on actually what happens. It's a lot of anecdotal data on both sides. So I hope as we think about this and we move forward, we find ways to get the data that we need. I appreciate the impacts on youth. I appreciate all the comments about people being frustrated. I think that this is important. It's something that we need to keep fighting for. It pains me to vote to extend something that is flawed like this, but I really appreciate the work ahead that's laid out in the staff report, and I hope that the rest of the council will support an extension so that we can have a thoughtful rewrite with a lot of good input from the community and the different stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Healy.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. I would hope that the council would modify the ordinance to provide a 3-month extension to June 1 rather than the open-ended extension, or actually elimination of the sunset provision entirely. And I'm going to refrain from saying anything specific about the guts of the ordinance at this point, other than to say that at a kind of at a high altitude level, I was really struck by Clayton's comment about landlords and tenants having a symbiotic relationship, and I think that's true. Landlords need tenants, tenants need landlords, and I think we need to be very careful about not creating unintended consequences while we're trying to do good. And I'm not sure that how much consideration was given to that. We also received a fairly thoughtful letter from the North Bay Association of Realtors, and Madam Clerk, I don't know if this got included in the comments, it should be, but kind of, again, at a high altitude, it was making the point that the housing crisis that we're experiencing here in Petaluma and Sonoma County, in the Bay Area, in coastal California and beyond, it really has a lot of reasons why we're there, and it's local governments, it's cost of building, it's zoning, it's council members listening to NIMBY neighbors. It's really a whole host of things, and yet we have this ordinance that is basically trying to pretend that the only villains in this show are landlords, and I think that's incredibly simplistic. And I think we need to have a much more thorough overview of the housing situation before we go diving in and dealing with one subpart of it. So anyway, I look forward to the outreach actually happening in a meaningful and serious way, and seeing what comes back. But I do think that what we have right now is over the top and one-sided. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Healy. Councilmember Now.
I had a thought. This relocation costs, it goes back to the tenant. Is there a ceiling on that price? And is that cost going to get added back into the rent to the renters? Because a relocation cost could be, if they're moving into another location, could be 3 times the rent they're paying at the current location, correct?
Sure. So it could be. The ordinance sets the relocation assistance to equal the current monthly rent, unless the tenant qualifies for a 50% increase in that, so it'll be 150% of the current rent if they are a disabled person or meet one of the other requirements. So that's how it's set in the ordinance. So it's capped at the equivalent of either 100% of the rent or 150% of the rent if the tenants qualify for the additional 50% as specified, and I can provide the details of that if the council would like.
That does explain part of my question, but the landlord is going to, some landlords, we heard tonight, have not raised rents in 6 years. And so if they raise the rent and it brings it up, and then they have a reason to relocate this tenant, is that going to cause for legal problems in the future? I think we really need to make the language a little clearer and make it a little clearer for both tenants and landlords.
Isn't that the intent of the outreach? Councilmember Now, I believe that's the intent of the outreach, is to make sure it's clearer.
Right, to basically to gather all the suggestions that the stakeholders have, the ones we've heard already and the ones that are offered in the stakeholder process, and come back to the council with options. That's what the council wanted to do. That's what we didn't have time to do initially because we were racing to have something in place before the Sonoma County COVID protections expired. So that's how we ended up where we are.
I understand that, but I don't feel comfortable with it this evening, with the way it's written. without knowing that all the stakeholders have had a say. I just turned in that Norbar letter tonight to Kendall, the city clerk's office, because I was handed it at a private meeting with a stakeholder. And it has a lot of really good information. And Councilmember Healy brought it up this evening.
So, as I said, we've got a list of suggestions we've received so far from landlords and tenants and advocates for each, and we'll be glad to look at all the submissions, the ones that you're referring to, and we'll be getting the survey results, and the council will have all that before them if they choose to proceed with the stakeholder process that the outgoing council directed us to proceed with.
Well, I think I'm going to look forward to that thoughtful rewrite.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Posake.
Thanks. It's hard for me to see this in any way as one-sided, as a couple of folks have said. I think that even though I believe that gradually over time some minor effects at tenant protection have occurred, that the power balance between tenants and landlords chronically shifts in the other direction. And I think that even as is, this ordinance does not give tenants power over landlords. I do believe housing's a human right. I've listened to many landlords and tenants in this regard, and based on the words of the landlords, for example, not raising rents for 6 years, I don't think that landlord's going to be affected by this outside of a little bit of paperwork. Again, I think there are compromises that could be made here, and there are amendments and improved writing that should be done, but I think that we should extend the current act because that's all we're able to do at this point. I would say for 1 month beyond what the city now says they need. The minimum that we think is needed right now, I like to suggest that we go 1 month longer than that to be sure we don't have to kick the can down the road again. That's all I have.
Councilmember Shribs.
So far, I've been agreeing with what's been said up here. I think extending the date, not having a date, we need to change that. So putting on a date, we've had two proposals, one for June 1, and then Councilman Posake says maybe suggesting a July 1 sunset date to set it so that we send a message that we are going to repair and do work. What I'd like to see added to the schedule here that's been put forth. So far, I've listened to the prior meeting and sitting through this meeting, it really feels like a us versus them that's been happening. And I believe in the symbiosis is really where we need to be. So one of the proposals, besides the city seems to be stuck in the middle of being judge and referee and final writing of this thing. And then we have these two, like a court case coming at us and providing arguments, but we're stuck in the middle. Providing and coming up with all the answers, the legal language and everything, and the ordinance. What I'd like to propose is that besides the city going through its process of outreach and education, what I would like to see recommended is that 2 or 3 lawyers from one side, 2 or 3 lawyers from the other side, get together in the same room and actually come up with a compromise that they feel would work for both sides somehow on their own and somehow come in. But that may have been done, may have been tried, but somehow the two groups need to come to a compromise somewhere in the middle that's going to work for both parties. And so I'd like, if that's possible, They can do that on their own outside of the city business that we're doing here, just as an idea, just to toss out there as a possible another process that might work. If it's just going to be completely juggerheads, then yes, we'll have to end up being the judge and jury and making up the rules and regulations ourselves here for these two very important groups of people that are our constituents. So I think we do have a process. I would like to see it gone through. We have a schedule. I think the staff's going to be committed to follow through with it. We have a May 3 deadline here on the process. Given council members Postakay's recommendation for maybe a July 1, so that if there's an extra month leeway, that might be a good approach. So I'd like to amend the current proposal to put a July 1 date on it as a sunset date, and so that the staff has enough time to get their work done and propose through.
Thank you. Councilmember Posake?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. That was a motion, John?
Yes.
Thank you. It's been seconded by Dennis Posake. Council member. Okay. So, let's see.
So
I guess we vote, correct?
Vice Mayor, you can ask if there's any other questions. If not, I can take the roll call vote.
Are there any other questions? Nope. So we'll go ahead and do a roll call.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
No?
Now,
No.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs.
Let me just add, is this with the amendment? Okay, then I would say yes.
This is with the amendment that you made.
Yes.
Apologies there. I lost my screen. Motion passes 4-2 with Healy and Now voting no and McDonald recused. And with that, we will ask Mayor McDonald to return to the chamber.
Okay, and we're moving on to item 15. 14. Okay, 14 it is. The resolution approving council appointments.
Yes, thank you. This is my item. The item for City Council liaison appointments to city commissions and committees. In accordance with City Council rules and procedures, the mayor has solicited interest from the council members prior to the meeting. Those responses from the council members were included as attachment 3 to the staff report. The mayor has considered those requests for appointment and has provided his recommendations as shown on attachment 2 to the staff report. I do have attachment 2 with the mayor's recommendations for appointment available to share on my screen. If that is the will of the council or mayor, I'm happy to bring that up. But other than that, that is my report, and I'll look to you for discussion.
Okay, any questions from the council up in here? No? Let's open this as a public comment period. And I do not have any cards here. I'll ask if any comments were provided before the meeting.
Mayor McDonald, no comments were provided prior to the meeting.
Thank you very much. Let's see what we have in the Zoom audience today.
Thank you, Mayor. Any member of the public wishing to speak on this specific item, please raise your hand in Zoom and you'll be called on in turn. You'll have 3 minutes in which to give your comments. Looking at the attendee list, I see no hands raised.
Thank you very much. Let's come back to council. Councilmember Healy.
Move approval.
Thank you for that.
Second.
And I'm sorry, Councilmember Barnacle with the second on that. So lacking further comment, let's go to roll call vote.
Barnacle,
Yes.
Cater Thompson,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes?
Now,
Yes.
Posake,
Yes.
Shribs,
Yes.
McDonald.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
And that closes that item, and I believe that brings us to an adjournment for the evening. And so thank you very much, everyone, and welcome aboard, everybody new. See you in a short while. Adjourned.